In April 2020, at FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., emergency exemptions were signed as global cargo demand spiked beyond capacity. Airlines scrambled to reactivate 747-400 freighters pulled from desert storage. Aircraft delivered in the 1980s suddenly became the backbone of global supply chains. The twist was, this was not about nostalgia or engineering excellence. It was about contracts, cargo physics, and regulatory inertia. Here is how Boeing's most iconic widebody refused to die when the world needed cargo capacity most. By January 2017, Boeing delivered its final 747-8 from the Everett factory. The twin-engine era had arrived. Aircraft like the 777F and 787 offered better fuel efficiency, extended range, and lower operating costs. The business logic was clear. Twin-engine widebodies could do everything the 747 could do, but cheaper. Analysts agreed. The retirement made sense on paper. But the business case contained a hidden flaw that almost no one noticed at the time. No twin-engine freighter could replicate the 747's unique nose-loading capability. The forward cargo door allowed airlines to load outsized freight that could not fit through side doors on any other aircraft. That feature seemed like a niche advantage in 2017. Cargo operators paid attention, even if Boeing's commercial sales division did not. By 2018, Atlas Air, Cargolux, and Kalitta were expanding their 747 fleets, not retiring them. The nose door advantage was not theoretical. A single 747 could carry industrial turbines, aerospace components, and humanitarian relief equipment that would have required multiple flights on smaller freighters. Airlines were not being sentimental, they were following the revenue. The specialized capability beat the efficiency math in specific market segments. At the 2019 Paris Air Show, Boeing showcased the 777X, and Airbus showcased the A350F concepts. The industry assumed freighter demand would follow established patterns, moderate growth, and fleet replacement on planned set schedules. Boeing projected that 777F deliveries would absorb demand as older 747s aged out. Maintenance providers scheduled workforce reductions for training specific to the 747. The entire supply chain was optimizing for a world where the 747 would fade gracefully over a decade or more. That stability vanished in weeks when the pandemic eliminated assumptions that had governed aviation economics. By March 2020, international passenger traffic collapsed over 90%. Belly cargo capacity vanished instantly. Approximately 40% of global air cargo moved in passenger aircraft holds. Over 4 million tons of capacity evaporated between March and May 2020. Freight forwarders faced demand spikes for medical supplies while capacity contracted sharply. Dedicated freighter operators found themselves with unprecedented pricing power. April 2020 brought emergency reversals. Airlines pulled stored 747 freighters from desert facilities. The FAA issued temporary exemptions, allowing deferred maintenance intervals for cargo operations supporting pandemic response. Old aircraft became strategic assets overnight. Atlas Air, Cargolux, and Kalitta negotiated contracts at rates that would have been unthinkable months earlier. By mid-2020, the 747 fleet was flying more hours than projected in pre-pandemic planning. D-check heavy maintenance costs ranged from $8 million to $12 million per aircraft, sometimes exceeding the aircraft's market value. Sunk cost. Psychology took over. The immediate revenue from high cargo rates justified continued investment in aging airframes. Airlines were betting that conditions would persist long enough to recover the maintenance investment. By late 2020, engine parts shortages emerged. As the active fleet had been shrinking, manufacturers reduced parts inventory accordingly. The pandemic reversed the fleet reduction trend abruptly, but supply chains could not pivot as fast. Lead times stretched from weeks to months for some components. Airlines acquired additional aircraft solely for parts harvesting. 2021 brought tightening inspection regimes from the FAA and EASA. Aircraft flying more hours than planned needed more frequent inspections. Compliance costs rose sharply. The regulatory actions collided directly with economic pressures. Airlines needed the 747s operational to fulfill contracts. Regulators needed assurance that aging aircraft could safely sustain higher utilization. And still, there was no replacement aircraft available. The 777F production slots were fully booked years in advance. Airbus had not certified the A350F yet. 2022 brought delays to 777X freighter certification. The 777-8F, which was supposed to begin replacing 747 freighters in the mid-2020s, faced an uncertain entry into service date. Airlines negotiated lease extensions on aircraft they had planned to return. Fleet planners understood they were trapped. Walking away from the 747s meant capacity gaps they could not fill, and continuing to operate them meant accumulating maintenance costs that would eventually exceed any reasonable return threshold. Training pipelines for 747 pilots and mechanics began shrinking precisely when demand spiked. The airline industry had been reducing 747 training capacity for years. When demand reversed, the training infrastructure could not scale back up quickly. Simulator availability became a bottleneck, and qualified instructors were in short supply. By 2023, aviation insurance brokers were raising premiums on aging wide-body freighters. Average age was climbing past 30 years, utilization was above historical norms, and parts availability constraints created maintenance scheduling pressures. Cargo yields remained elevated through 2024. Airlines operated aircraft that cost more to maintain each year because revenue exceeded costs. Efficiency proved contextual. In 2019, the 747 was inefficient. In 2024, it was irreplaceable for specific missions. But time was winning. Average fleet age exceeded 35 years. Parts were harder to source, training remained constrained, insurance costs kept rising. The 2025 outlook showed shrinking fleets with no true successor certified. The industry had optimized for efficiency, not resilience. When passenger belly cargo disappeared, no rapid replacement existed. The replacement aircraft remained years from service entry. The factory floor that once delivered 3 aircraft per day sat silent. One question lingered: what else is aging quietly, waiting for the next shock?